Good morning, colleagues. It's 10 o'clock. So it is my pleasure to declare the opening of the third workshop for the facilitative sharing of views under the international consultation and analysis process. I have no gavel, sorry. I would like to welcome all participants to this event under the SBI, and in particular the representatives of the 5 non-Annex 1 parties which will undergo the FSV at this session. They all have worked hard to prepare for this session, and I am confident that our discussion today will help to strengthen the process and encourage more and more non-Annex 1 parties to participate. And before launching our work, I would like to announce that immediately after the closing of this workshop, the third part of the second round of the multilateral assessment working group session will take place also here in room Geneva. But now I would like to invite the Secretariat to share a little surprise with all of us, the clip that demonstrates the benefits of participating in ICA process by developing countries.
Developing countries participate in the measurement, reporting, and verification process, also known as MRV, which fosters transparency, trust, and confidence, and promotes climate action. At the facilitated sharing of views, Zebu showcased the work it has been doing and shared its constraints, challenges, and lessons learned. Hey Zebu, do you mind sticking around so that we can tell everyone about your experience participating in MRV? Thanks, Zebu. Zebu gained a lot of benefits from participating in MRV, both at the international and national levels. Zebu collected and analyzed its own data. It used this data, along with its greenhouse gas inventory and mitigation assessments, to fully understand its opportunities related to reducing emissions in all sectors. These opportunities are known as mitigation options. Zebu then used its mitigation options to help formulate its own low emissions development strategy. Zebu also used its vulnerability and adaptation assessments to understand its unique vulnerabilities and opportunities. Zebu used these adaptation options to inform its climate resilient strategy, helping the country to better adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change. Together, these strategies became an important part of Zebu's National Development Plan. As part of MRV, Zebu submitted its national reports to the convention, which underwent a thorough scientific process. And then, Zebu developed robust policies and plans. And now the international community is aware of Zebu's efforts, challenges, and needs, prompting international support initiatives. Nationally, all this hard work has raised awareness among stakeholders and increased Zebu's political buy-in. The work of MRV has also enhanced the technical capacity of Zebu's sectoral experts so that they can better plan and implement low-emission and climate-resilient actions. Zebu has gained many benefits from its enthusiastic engagement, including informing policies, plans, strategies, and programs, political buy-in, improved access to support, capacity building, and increased awareness. Zebu has been working hard, and now it's preparing for its next National Communication and Biennial Update Report. This continuous process makes participation in MRV easier and more effective for Zebu year after year, helping Zebu see clearly how it is progressing towards a low-carbon and climate-resilient economy. Each country's journey will be different, but through the MRV process, we have an opportunity to understand, share, and address our challenges together, paving new ways for sustainable development.
Pretty great movie. Congratulations. So hopefully everybody liked this film, and let's try now to move forward in our session. In particular, I'm looking forward to having constructive interaction amongst parties. As it was demonstrated in the past facilitative sharing of views sessions, these workshops allow parties to exchange in a very positive manner the experiences on the implementation of the MRV framework and showcase the efforts done at national level to put such framework in place. I would like to congratulate the 5 non-Annex 1 parties who will present during this workshop for submitting the first biennial update reports and going through the technical analysis process. The participation in the FSV workshop today marks the completion of the first ICA cycle, which is undoubtedly an achievement. In particular, I would like to congratulate Jamaica. You are the first small island developing state from Caribbean region that submitted its biennial update report. For this effort and achievements and in facilitating prompt completion publication of the summary report, this is remarkable. At the same time, I would like to invite other seats and LDCs to take the opportunity to participate in the ICA process and submit the BURs at the earliest convenience, keeping in mind that the submission is at the discretion. Following the example of these parties, I would like to also encourage all non-Annex 1 parties that have not done so to submit the first BURs. Distinguished colleagues, to facilitate a meaningful process and to ensure a positive experience for all, I would like to provide you with some highlights from the modalities and guidelines for international consultation analysis as contained in Decision 2CP17, paragraphs 56 to 62, and its Annex 4 before we begin. So, the ICA process, International Consultations and Analysis, including the FSV, will be conducted in a manner that is non-intrusive, non-punitive, and respectful of national sovereignty. This process aims to increase the transparency of mitigation actions and their effects, and the discussion on the appropriateness of such domestic policies and measures is not part of the process. Also, the BUR and summary report will serve as input to the FSV. To ensure effective time management at this session, the maximum time allocated to each party will be 40 minutes for the presentation and engaging in questions and answers. This is due to the number of parties presenting in half a day, and should the party receive no questions, I will move on to the next party, and of course flexibility is envisaged in terms of the time allocated for everybody. While the format of these presentations is at each party's discretion, I have encouraged all to summarize to the extent possible questions received in advance from other parties and relevant responses. To ensure all parties have the opportunity to ask questions, I will encourage parties to limit themselves to 2 questions for each party in the first round. If time permits, the second round of questions will be facilitated. I will collect several questions from parties in one round and ask the specific party undergoing the FSV to respond to these questions, and thereafter I will move on the subsequent round. Parties will present their BURs in alphabetical order, so we will start from Armenia. And I now invite our dear colleague, Ms. Diana Harutyunyan, Climate Change Program Coordinator, to deliver a brief presentation. Diana, you have the floor.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, distinguished colleagues, it's my pleasure to be the first presenter on the first workshop of facilitative sharing of views. And let me extend appreciation to all experts and specialists who worked for preparing of Armenia's biennial update report, as well as independent technical review team who have undertaken the review of our report. The biennial update report of Armenia was presented to the convention in April 2016, and it was developed according to the guidelines, as was mentioned by the chair, and it includes all required information and as well as projections of scenarios to assess the forecasted impacts of mitigation actions to the 2030 period. To provide some context, Armenia is a landlocked country, mountainous country in the South Caucasus region, with the territory approximately 30,000 square kilometers and population of around 3 million people. Currently, 63% of population lives in urban areas, and more than half of that lives in the capital city of Yerevan. The GDP per capita in 2012 was $7,650. Referring to the national circumstances which have a direct contact with the GHG emissions and mitigation objectives and potential, it is important to mention that the climate in Armenia is dry continental, with the average annual temperature around 5.5 degrees Celsius, while the absolute minimum registered is -40 degrees and absolute higher temperature registered is 43 degrees. So it entails certain energy for heating in winter and cooling in summer. Armenia has no native resources of fossil fuel and depends entirely from the export of oil and natural gas to cover its energy demand. The indigenous energy resources are hydro, nuclear, and biofuel, which constitute 27% of total primary energy consumption needs of the country. Armenia has a single integrated power supply system. The share of energy generated by natural gas-fired thermal power plants makes 42%, including very high efficient combined cycle gas turbine plants. And the nuclear power plant generates 29% and large hydropower 22% and small renewables 7%. It means that the Armenian grid is enough low carbon intensive. Armenia has ratified the Paris Agreement and Doha Amendment in 2017 and has submitted its national determined contributions, including the quantitative per capita target to limit the growth of greenhouse gas emissions. Since 1998, Armenia on a regular basis is preparing and adopting by the governmental decree the climate change action plans, and the last was approved in 2016, and it's important to mention that it states that starting from 2016 onward, Armenia on each second year has to develop its biennial update reports. The institutional structure for UNFCCC implementation in Armenia is as follows. The Inter-Ministerial Council is established by Prime Minister order and is chaired by Minister of Nature Protection and is comprised for 14 ministries and 4 key agencies representatives. The Council ensures inter-sectoral coordination of climate change policy, and inter alia also is coordinating the preparation and validation of national communications and national and biennial update reports. And the Climate Change Atmosphere Protection Division was established in the ministry in 2015, and the Climate Change Program Unit, operating in the framework of memorandum signed between Minister of Nature Protection and UNDP, is supporting the ministry in its coordination role as the authorized national entity for the convention implementation. and also supporting the national communication and biennial update report preparations. The biennial update report was prepared with the help of national expert team, and it includes an inventory which was prepared according to the 2016 guidelines. And the team benefited from the experience gained from the previous practice of national communication preparation, which was also prepared, the GHG inventory prepared also with the same new guidelines. The GHG inventory report of 2011 and 2012, as well as revised time series for period of 2000 to 2012, were included in the biennial report. The IPCC inventory software was used as the online portal for input data by the experts and emission calculations, and as well as for the results analysis. The main principle of GHG inventory preparation were clear observation and reliance on 2016 guidelines, priorities placed to the national data and indicators, and all possible available data sources were utilized, and the formal channels are used for requesting data from corresponding ministries, agencies as needed, as well as from private sector. The total GHG emissions in 2012 without land use and forestry makes 9,829 gigagram in CO2 equivalent. And the biggest source of emissions is energy sector with 70%, followed by agriculture, and with equal shares from industrial processes and product use and waste sectors. By gases, the dominant emitting gas is CO2, followed by methane, and the amount of methane emissions are attributed to the extended gas network with storage and transportation sector system fugitive emissions. The GHG emission trends were analyzed for the period of 2000 till 2012, and it is important to note in this context that there was a drastic decline in GHG emissions in Armenia from 1990 base year, which is mainly caused by economic transition to market economy, and which was accompanied with deep recession and certain structural changes in economy when energy-intensive industries were replaced by services and other non-energy intensive sectors of economy, as well as with the elimination of the use of heavy oil for energy generation. GHG emissions in 2012 comprised only 39% of the ones emitted in 1990. And in per capita terms, it means that in 1990 we have 7.2 tons per capita, and in 2012 only 3.1 ton per capita. However, during the period of 2000 to 2012, there is economic growth, and it was accompanied also with the increase of emissions. Only in 2009 and 2010 there was impact from the economic recession. The GHG emissions from energy sector as the biggest emitter is studied in more details and presented here, and are from two main categories: fuel combustion and fugitive emissions from natural gas system. And from fuel combustion, the dominant emitters are electricity generation, road transportation, and residential sectors, which are in the center of our mitigation policies. Looking on the trends, we can say that since 2000, the energy sector emissions has increased by 69%, and this is due to economic growth and growth of traffic volume, as well as improved household living conditions, and unprecedented level of gasification. Nearly 95% of our communities are gasified since 2004, and mainly for gas for space heating. is used. From 2000 to 2012, the transport sector emissions are growing steadily, as well as the emissions from household energy use is increased fivefold. Emissions from electricity production has varied considerably due to conditions in economy, as well as from the amount of energy exported. And there is a certain influence of weather conditions which affect the need of energy for heating and cooling, as well as availability of hydro resources for production in renewable energy plants. For a period of 2000 to 2005, Armenia's economy has characterized with rapid growth, around 12% annually, while the GHG emissions growth was rather slow because there was structural change in economy and the increased share of non-energy intensive branches of economy. There are certain improvements in GHG preparation since the last GHG inventory. Was included 11 subcategories, and with the Tier 2 and 3 methods were applied. 5 country-specific emission factors were developed, and 6 new subcategories were considered. Besides this, the online platform was used based on IPCC 2006 software, and the report was reviewed by independent international experts supported by UNDP UNEP Global Support Program, and it helps to improve the quality of inventory. The transparency was ensured through the translated version of inventory, which was uploaded on the website and for review and comments of national stakeholders. Coming to the mitigation projections reported in the BOR, it's important to mention that the energy sector was in the center of our analysis, and the main national documents which was placed for this analysis was National Sustainable Development Plan for Armenia up to 2012-25 and the energy sector strategy document. During that period. The objective of energy sector development is fully in line with mitigation objectives of the country, which is based on the concept that there is important to increase the utilization of indigenous energy resources, including renewable energy, nuclear energy, as well as in promoting the energy efficiency. The target for increasing the share of renewable energies, not without large hydropower plants, is to reach 25% share in energy in power generation by 2020 and to 25% by 2025. To achieve those targets, both legislative policies and favorable conditions for investments are created, and there are a certain amount of grants and loan resources attracted for reaching that objectives. One example is the high level of growth of small hydropower plants, and the installed capacity of small hydropower plants was increased fourfold in 10-year period. Of course, there was some negative impacts on environment, which now the government is trying to fix. In 2014, the program for scaling up of renewable energy development was approved, and the change was done in the energy law and energy efficiency law and renewable energy laws, which create conditions for distributed electricity production from photovoltaic plants, and there were certain improvements in net metering and in open market for distributed photovoltaic stations. Yesterday, I received the notes from the country that the first megawatt photovoltaic plant was opened in region, and so it is a good sign that this policy is working. Another important, but mainly not fully realized mitigation potential is in energy efficiency on a consumption side. And from 2010, national energy efficiency action plans for 3-year periods have been developed and improved by the government decrees, stating the quantitative targets for sectors. And the amendment in the law on energy saving and renewable energy was done, establishing minimum energy performance for new and renovated buildings, and it was passed in 2016. Besides that, 17 cities in Armenia have signed the Covenant of Mayors and have been developing their own sustainable energy action plans, including capital city Yerevan. The mitigation measures in the country are being implemented both on generation and demand side. And already I gave some details about generation side, and on the consumption side, on these slides they are grouped by the to be more evident. The mitigation goals are realized in combination of legislative improvements and attraction of grant and loan resources. And the one of the example is maps in enforcement in residential buildings, and in transport sector is important that it's growing sector with emissions, and the measures are aimed to increase and optimize the public road transportation grid, as well as replacement of minibuses with the larger buses, and to use more electricity-based transportation modes. During the preparation of the first biennial update report, the LEAP Armenia software was developed and used to generate projections of greenhouse gas emissions under several scenarios, without measures, with measures, and with additional measures. And this slide is showing the impact of all these scenarios. And as of 2030, the prevailing part of GHG emission reduction potential, about 71%, can be resulted from the new nuclear power plant, and about 90% from new renewables, and remaining from the energy efficiency measures. Certain steps for improving the MRV system domestic is as follows. We have used the grid emission factor as a standardized baseline, and it was developed and approved by CDM board, and is used for validation of the impacts of energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. The energy balance preparation now is mandatory starting from 2015, and it is a positive change, and is supporting the data collection and validation. And GHG inventory and mitigation measure projects implemented in the country are collected through the formats that are distributed by the ministry. In general, the main obstacles in GHG preparation is that the formal channels for data provisions have not been worked out yet. And the lack of detailed information on fuel consumption in transport sector. Uncertainty and trends assessment capacity is not yet in place to the extent that we will desire. And the main obstacles are uncertainties and in GHG inventory in forest and land use sector, as well as mitigation sectors in non-energy sector are not convincing us to meet our mitigation goals. So I want to say that we have very positive experience gained from national team and in participating in ICA process. The ICA increased the ownership and responsibility of Ministry of Nature Protection as coordinating entity in the country, and underlined the importance of intersectoral communication between partners. With this, I would like to thank you with my presentation, and if Chair will allow, I will move to question and answer section. Armenia has received 12 questions from online portal, and the answers were provided correspondingly in written form, and the questions were grouped as the following, and I will present in this the corresponding slides. So from Japan, we have received the question understanding challenges of as the team faced with applying IPCC 2006 guidelines. I can say that our expert team has experience with the third national communication, so we don't see any difficulty in this. The main obstacles we see with the application of the IPCC software, which is not allowing the team to identify case sources on appropriate disaggregation level by subcategories. And another example which we face is the fuel consumption structure in road transportation is quite specific in Armenia, with 70% the predominance of compressed natural gas in 2012 data. However, the 2006 IPCC software is not allowing disaggregation of GHG emissions from road transport by fuel types. New Zealand, also on the inventory issue, is commended the team for using country-specific emission factors and was interested to know what further improvements are planned under inventory. So the things that we plan in the first biennial report is already applied in the second biennial update report preparation, which is ready, and we will soon submit to the Secretariat as a separate GHG inventory report. And the planned improvements are as follows: to introduce a higher tier approach in 3 new subcategories and include 14 new subcategories. The Thailand was interested in knowing the details of how assumptions and methodologies are applied in refrigeration and air conditioning sector. So we can say that the RAC is defined as a K emission sector in IPPU sector. So HFC emissions were estimated applying tier 2 method and calculated based on the data for imported HFC containing equipment, because it is not produced in Armenia. So it was provided by Customs Service of Armenia. So that's why we can apply the national data. Second group of questions refers to mitigation impact assessment and methodologies. And Japan and USA are interested in the details of methodologies used to estimate impact of mitigation actions. The emissions from energy sector were estimated using by LEAP software, and I presented it in my presentation already. However, the forestry CO2 emissions were assessed based on the data on reforestation areas, and we used the factor from the 2006 IPCC guidelines. Waste sector mitigation measures impact was corresponding to the CDM project monitoring report, and which is validated and is available on the UNFCCC website. The USA would like also to know why the electricity expert figures in 3 mitigation forecast scenarios are applied on the same scale. And we would like to say that we have based our information on the international agreements which Armenia has signed with neighboring countries, which do not forecast any change in the volumes of experts. So we have based our assumptions on existing documents. Egypt was interested to know how the mitigation actions are expected to be achieved via national plans, as well as through existing institutional arrangements are used in the country for GHG inventory. So I think these questions was covered in my presentation, and more detailed answers was provided through the dedicated portal. Japan was interested in specific programs. Coming to the next group of questions, the specific programs in Armenia as IFC funded Armenia Sustainable Energy Finance Project, Green for Growth Fund Project, GAP project. So under these programs, which was funded by IFC and German government through KfW Bank, their loan facilities have provided to the commercial banks, which provided in their term long-term financing on affordable rates to the customers to promote the renewable energy and energy development in Armenia and its energy efficiency, mainly in SME sector. USA is interested to know the AFLU sector capacity building needs, and as I mentioned, it is a real gap in our national capacity, and I think the uncertainties in the emissions are we see as an obstacles for result-based financing instruments to be applied in this sector, and so we see need to increase the national capacity in this sector. However, some actions are already planned in the GFUNDP fund project on the RED project implementing now in the country, but this sector needs continuous support and continuous support also from international community. So with this, Chair, I finish my presentation.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, this presentation was a little bit longer than we thought it would be, but I thought it is good to have the opportunity to listen to everything that our colleagues from Armenia prepared for us. I now open the floor for you. I see India willing to ask the floor, so India, US, Japan, Sudan. India.
Thank you, Chair. At the outset, we commend Armenia for a very excellent presentation. Congratulations to you. We have two quick questions. On BUR page 13 states that inventory improvements have been done in assessment of GHG emissions from natural gas combustion and fugitive emissions of natural gas by applying Tier 2 methodology. We commend Armenia for this improvement done. We would just like to understand how Tier 2 was applied. Were new national emission factors developed and applied? BUR doesn't provide any source of information on emission factors used, hence this curiosity. The second question is, biomass accounts for 5% of primary energy supply in your country. National GHG inventory for 2012 as presented in BUR 1 gives estimate for non-CO2 GHGs from biomass burning. This is on page 62, 3.C.1. However, CO2 emissions from biomass have not been provided under memo item entry in the inventory. So, just out of again curiosity, what limited the party from carrying out the emissions of CO2 emissions from biomass burning? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The US, please.
Hi, good morning. We also want to extend our congratulations to Armenia for arriving at this step and the progress that you've made in reporting. And we also want to thank you for the responses to the written questions also in the presentation and through the portal. So we just had one follow-up question. We noted that Armenia submitted a separate national inventory report with its initial BUR, and we just wanted to understand if there were any lessons learned from this approach. Thanks.
Thank you. And final questions before I give the floor to Armenia, Japan, and then after Armenia answers, we'll go back to Sudan and China. Japan, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. First of all, thank you very much, Armenia, for your very informative presentation, and congratulations on your first BU submission. And I also comment that your BU 2 will be submitted soon. And also, I appreciate that you responded to our written questions in advance by showing in the presentation slides. I have a quick questions. So in your presentation slide, you introduced about the experience in ICA process, and I have a follow-up question on that. And I think after submitting the BUR, you went through the technical analysis process. So could you please share with us any important experience or lesson learned from the technical analysis, which you can utilize in the next maybe next BU03 submissions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And as I promised, I would like now to ask Armenia to answer these questions, and then we will be back.
First of all, thank you for good questions. And coming by the order, as colleague from US mentioned that we have separate national inventory report, which is also on the UNFCCC portal uploaded. So the details on the fugitive emissions calculations and the emission factors used as national factors, details can be found there. But in a detail, in a brief, I can say that for applying the TR2 in the fugitive emissions, we use the calorific value of the gas which are important to Armenia, and this was used as a for calculation base of the emissions from this sector. Coming to biomass, the emissions from biomass are calculated in energy combustion sector. And that is why maybe we will look on it in detail later on in a team to the question that you raised for memo item. But I can say that for biomass, the emissions are part of energy balance of Armenia, and it was used in the conversion sector analysis. And the key biomass used in Armenia is wood and manure in a form of dank in household sector. I don't know if I answered to the prominent delegate from India in a proper manner, but maybe we can continue this question discussion. And about the question from US on preparing the separate report, this is very good experience which was used not the first time, but because we used this approach also during preparation of national communication, because the team of experts is rotating, and this is a good way to keep archivated the detailed information of inventory preparation. And it is also as a training tool for the newcomers in a team of GAG inventory preparation in Armenia. And on the IC process importance and lessons question from Japan, I can say that this helped us to understand all the details that we need to include in a biennial update report. For example, the questions from this process placed to Armenia give us thoughts to improve the biennial report too, when we put in more details the methodologies used to assess the impact of mitigation measures. Now, you can see in the next BUR that this part is drastically improved. It is more details and more accurately this part is reported.
Thank you very much. And now we are back to questions. Sudan, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Let me first congratulate Armenia for submission their first BUR and for the insightful presentation that they provided. I just wanted to know what kind of support did the Global Support Program provided to Armenia in doing the BUR, and also did you provide any information regarding the provision of financial support needed or received, or any information regarding the RED Plus activities? Thank you.
Thank you very much. China, please.
Thank you, Chair. First, congratulations to the Armenia on the very comprehensive introduction on the BUR, and we do appreciate your efforts on this work. And we have two questions. The first is that could you please share with us some challenges you have during the process of the compilation of BURs, especially in terms of the institutional arrangement? And the second question is that we noticed that there is domestic action named the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan. There are two versions. One is in the 2010, the other is in 2016. So could you please elaborate the main changes between the two versions and in which area you make the progress? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Austria, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Armenia, for your presentation and also for the comprehensive information on the inventory which you submitted. My question is relating to the goal you presented on the increase to share renewable energy. You mentioned a concept on development of hydro energy. Would you be able to just name an example? Is it more construction of new plants which are planned, or is it improvement, extension of current plants, or is it both? If you could just name an example of your plans here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Don't see anybody else willing to ask the question. So Armenia, please.
Thank you, Sudan, for the question. The Global Support Program provided financial support involving the international expert who reviewed our draft inventory report before publication. So the comments and observations which was done was used to improve it before final submission. So this was very useful experience because first of all, it's not easy to use to find the proper expert through open call for such type of assessment, and this needs some experienced person, and it was very useful, and we are very thankful for this experience. So on a provision of support, the project was funded by the Global Environmental Facility, and this was reported in the biennial update report, but for mitigation measures which are listed in the corresponding chapter of the biennial update report are listed all projects which are supported by international assistant banks and programs, and with the corresponding financial inputs to these programs and projects. So on RED Plus support, we don't have any big achievements, but the project that now is under implementation in the country is will create some basement for that, because there will be measuring and reporting and verification system for two main forested areas in Armenia, which are selected as a pilot areas, and maybe this system, if will be in place, Armenia can move to RED Plus program also. Coming to the question of China, the challenges on boor and preparation are mainly, there was not worked out system of collecting and always rating the projects which are implemented in different sectors are as mitigation projects, because these projects are going on as a project for energy system improvement or energy security project, and so to select and to communicate the information what is requested for reporting takes some time, but I think that we have created some knowledge in corresponding sectors, and next biennial report information collection which was done was more structured and more easy and more accurate. So the institutions, this system is better worked out, and we hope that with the next biennial report, the quality will be evident. On a second question from China on domestic measures for energy efficiency, I can say that the national energy efficiency action plans are developed for 3-year period. That is why you have two documents, one for period of 2010 to 2013, and next was from 2000, there was a gap, certain gap, but next one was approved in 2016 and covers another 3-year period. So with improvements which was done is that preparing a second National Energy Efficiency Action Plan was analyzed the impact of the first one, and was assessed that the targets placed were achieved, and it was a good result, mainly through the energy efficiency in public sector and in industrial sector projects, but not on household level. In a second National Action Plan is provide more details and is based on the action plans which the urban areas have developed. And now we see the important challenge to involve cities in implementation of energy efficiency action plan. And practically the 1/3 of population lives in the city of Yerevan, and most energy is consumed in the capital. So this Yerevan action plan is supported from city budget, and also now the city is very aggressively implementing energy efficiency measures in lighting sector and in transportation sector as it. So these are lessons learned from this planning process which push urban actions in different cities of Armenia. And here is very good positive experience we have with the EU support on Covenant of Mayors signatory cities to implement these measures as planned in their action plans. Coming to the question from Austria on increasing the renewable energy share, current plans are mainly on scaling up the renewable energy in solar energy utilization, and the main decisions taken are promoting the solar photovoltaic plant constructions, and the plan for constructing 40 megawatt plant is ongoing, and there was also permission to build another 11 plants with softer licensing environment for up to 1 megawatt plants. So for hydropower plants, there is a plan for building one medium-sized hydropower plant, and there are private investors for this project. And there is also projects for improving the energy efficiency of existing plants, putting more pressure on the quality of equipment placed in these hydropower plants to utilize appropriately the scarce energy resources of hydro resources in our rivers. Thank you, Chair. With this, I finish my answers.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation, for all the answers. Thank you very much, parties, for asking the questions. So, congratulations on the completion of the cycle. And we are now moving to Ecuador. And I now invite the representative of Ecuador, Ms. Maria Victoria Chiriboja, Undersecretary of Climate Change in the Ministry of Environment, to deliver her brief presentation. I saw you had 27 slides. So can you make it like 15 minutes? And of course, the whole presentation is uploaded, so please concentrate on what is the most important. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair. We will do our best to summarize and focus on the important details. First of all, I wanted to let you know that during our presentation, we will also be answering some of the questions that we received from the different parties. And well, I would like to begin by informing you that we presented basically our national circumstances, our greenhouse gas inventory, our mitigation actions, as well as our progress on MRV, and barriers, needs, opportunities, and as well as our Annex 4 Red Plus. And just to let you know a little bit about our national circumstances, how our institutional arrangements are at this point. Basically, we have beneath the presidency a Ministry of Environment that actually has an Undersecretariat of Climate Change. And we have an interinstitutional climate change committee that is chaired by the Ministry of Environment, and we have a secretariat whose role is the Undersecretary of Climate Change. And we have the participation of different ministries, as well as research institutes, local governments, and civil society and private sector who are helping us in this process. In terms of the institutional arrangements for the preparation of the national emissions inventory, basically what we did was come together with a group of the different sectors. So basically we had the Ministry of Environment as the leader, and we had sectorial leaders from the different ministries with interinstitutional groups that included other actors that weren't necessarily the ministerial actors. So we had the sector leader in energy, in waste, in industry, in agriculture, and in LULUCF. I also wanted to comment a little bit on our climate change regulatory framework, which at this point our constitution actually mentions on the need to act on climate change in mitigation and also in adaptation, our national development plan as well. And we have a few executive decrees, and now we have, and I speak about now because when our board was presented, we did not have an updated environmental law. We now have an updated environmental law that includes a climate change chapter in it. And basically, the institutions that were involved in the board development, as you can see, are many, from our Ministry of Electricity and Energy to our Minister of Agriculture, of Mobility, Secretariat of Water, our National Planification Secretariat. And the board was done with different cooperation agencies. We didn't just use the resources of the DEF that are allocated for the board through UNDP, but we also had help from other projects to be able to comply with the necessity of the board. So we had also help from FAO, the Low Emission Capacity Building Program, and the Global Support Program. Basically, to tell you a little bit about Ecuador, for those of you who don't know, Ecuador is one of the 70 mega biodiverse countries in the world. We have now, and when we presented this, we had 50 protected areas. Now we have 53, which represent 20% of our territory. 33% of our national territory is under some kind of conservation scheme, which also includes private initiatives, as well as local government initiatives and programs like the Sociobosque program. Also, it's important to mention that through our inventory analysis in the forest sector, we have been able to reduce in 49% annual net deforestation. In comparison, the dates 1990 to 2000, from 2008 to 2014. The water availability is 20,700 cubic meters per habitant per year. We have a lot of water. The problem in Ecuador is the distribution of the water. 80% goes to the Amazon basin, 9% goes to the coastal region where we have the most habitants. And so we do have a problem with water distribution in our country. We have 15.8 million inhabitants, and our largest population is in the urban sector, where we have 63% in cities and 37% is a rural population. We are, I understand, the highest populated country per kilometer square in Latin America. We have 56 inhabitants per kilometer square, and so forth. And now going into our national inventory system, I wanted to let you know that our first inventory was done in 1990. Our second Our second inventory was in reference to the years 94, 2000, 2006. And our BOR, our first biennial updated report, was on the inventory of 2010. So this is what we are reporting in this BOR. But we do have an advance, and it's that in our third national communication, we presented the GHG inventory for 2012. And in that inventory, in the third national communication, we updated the greenhouse gas emission inventories for 1994, 2000, 2006. And we also did a trend analysis for the period 94 to 2012. I'm mentioning this because this is one of the questions that we have from the European Union and other parties, specifically. And so I wanted to let you know that we have advanced since then, but we are presenting right now the 2010 greenhouse gas emission inventory for 2010. In that sense, first of all, to let you know that Ecuador has emitted 80,504 gigograms of CO2 equivalent during this year. As you can see, the largest sector, emitting sector in Ecuador is the energy sector, which represents 45% of this. And interestingly enough, within this sector, if we see it disaggregated in our inventory report, most of it is in the transport sector, in the mobility, and also in energy for industries. As you can see, the next sector is LULUCF with a 30%, agriculture with 18%, waste 4%, and industrial processes 3%. Also, we can see the greenhouse gas emissions by gases in this case. Some highlights in the energy sector, most of it is CO2, 45%. In the agriculture, most of it is nitrogen oxide, which is 95%. And LULUCF is also CO2. And in terms of our mitigation, press that too quickly. In terms of our mitigation actions that we developed, I wanted to specify certain projects that we have been developing. One of them, and I think probably one of the most important ones, is the energy sector, where we have 7 projects that are basically in 2 strategic action lines in energy generation and energy efficiency that we have been able to avoid on average emission of 1.7 million tons of CO2 per year by the construction of hydroelectric power plants, and basically getting to eliminate the thermal electric plants. This year, once these come into action, we will now have a 90% of our energy matrix under renewable energies, mostly hydroelectric plants. In the industry sector, we also have 2 projects aiming at changing the productive and energy matrix. Plan Renova was a project that looks to upgrade technology in refrigeration systems. And also there is a project that looks to shift efficient cooking stoves driven by induction technology to start phasing out gas use in stove systems. Also, in the agriculture, land use change and forestry, there has been a lot of process that we have reported. The Sociobosque program project that pays incentives for conserving forests, native forests, our national protected areas, as well as the reforestation project. And in that sense, it's important to mention that we have different pillars for the implementation of REDD+, where we now have a strategy which is called the REDD+ Action Plan. We have the reference level of forest emissions by deforestation, a national forest monitoring system, as well as a summary of information of safeguards. And in terms of waste, we have also been working with different projects. And one of these is to work with the local governments to be able to reduce a potential of 500,000 tons of CO2 in certain waste disposal sites. And this is something that we're working with 5 local governments to be able to meet this goal. And so we have presented various NAMAs in relation to the projects mentioned beforehand. where we have the energy generation NAMA, which it's the status until 2015, it was in execution phase in terms of that the hydroelectric plants were being built. And this had a potential reduction emission of 8.73 million tons of CO2 per average between the years of 2006 and 2025. In terms of the energy efficiency projects that we mentioned, it was also in an execution phase in 2015, and with a reduction emission potential of 1.04 million tons of CO2. And we also have another energy efficiency NAMA, which is related to the oil sector, where this project was looking to make more efficient the oil producing emissions. And this had a potential reduction of 1.69 million tons of CO2, and it's also in an executing phase in 2015. In terms of the clean development mechanism that was implemented in Ecuador, and this is very important for us because we had 31 projects registered, but because of what has happened in the negotiations with the Kyoto Protocol, we have had only 10 projects of these 31 that have actually issued CERs during the 2011-2013 period, which totals over 1 million tons of CO2 reduction. Most of the projects that were presented, 48%, were in the hydroelectrical area. And then you can see different possibilities like methane capture, wind, which were biomass energy, which were smaller projects or less projects. But as you can see, we had an issue with them being financed because of the international decisions. And in terms of the progress in measurement, reporting, and verification for Ecuador, we basically have proposed an MRV system within our environmental information system that holds the different information in general for environment, where we have a mitigation sector where we calculate the greenhouse gas emissions. It's called SINGEI. It's a specific system for calculating this and also reporting the greenhouse gas emissions. This was actually constructed during the BUR and also the third communication phase. And also to answer some of the questions, this system is being put in place. We are still missing part of the automation of the system, which we are looking currently for international funds to be able to do this. But we are pretty much advanced. And what this system is doing is basically making sure that the information from the different sectors is automatically put into the system. And we will have an output that will make things easier. In that sense, our new environmental law that will come in effect in 2018 actually has a obligation to different sectors to give the information to make sure that we have not just related to greenhouse gas emissions, but also to any climate related information. And in that sense, we also have part of our MRV system will also report reductions of greenhouse gas emissions. We will report the NAMAs, the CDM, RED Plus initiatives, and other mitigation initiatives. Also, we will be reporting within this MRV system the financing, for example, the result-based payments that are related to RED Plus and the forced emission reduction, as well as financial flows for mitigation actions, and also an adaptation MRV, where we will be reporting on vulnerability or risk, climate risk, and also resilience increase in the different sectors that are in our national strategy. And also, it will focus on creating and strengthening conditions in terms of knowledge and information generation, communication and involvement from all the different sectors and stakeholders, human and institutional training, as well as technology transfer within the country. This will be interesting to see also what we have propose to see how we can have technology transfer also from other places. And also we will report on non-carbon benefits that we have through the implementation of these activities in terms of reporting as well, reporting at a local level, national as well as international, and of course a national and international verification process within our MRV system. And in terms of barriers, I think that in terms of our information system for managing climate change knowledge, which I've already mentioned, we do have certain barriers in terms of governance, financial resources, capacity building and technical assistance, technology and technology transfer. In the different sectors, in the greenhouse inventories specifically, we have still issues with lack of agreement, or we had, when we reported the board, lack of agreement and information exchange. This has already been settled with the new law. There was also issues with interchange of information, scarce funding for research, and also an opportunity could be a strategy for financing. We have a shortage of specialists in terms of greenhouse gas inventories, and so it is an opportunity and a need to train in this subject. The support we received basically, and this is something that we would like to mention in terms of the different projects, we have over 43 actions and initiatives that have been implemented, mostly in the energy sector, as I had mentioned before, but also there has been many activities done in the LULUCF. And in that sense, we have had different cooperation sources from abroad, which include from Germany, China, European Union, Norway, Japan, United Nations, and others. It is also important to mention that, for example, the energy sector, in terms of mitigation, has been mostly credit lines, not non-refundable funding. So it's interesting also to see this. I would like to invite you to visit our website. We now have an analysis of how much Ecuador has invested in mitigation and adaptation through a new system. And additional needs for the different areas of climate action in Ecuador. Basically, we need to strengthen and we need to do the reports. The biennial update report, we need effective transfer of knowledge to ensure the sustainability of the reports with the different sectors. Also strengthening for vulnerability, risk assessment and adaptation analysis. Right now we're working on implementing our national inventory system, which also needs financing assistance also for the implementation of our different NAMAs. And finally, I wanted to talk very quickly about our technical annex for RED+. Ecuador presented in its first board this technical analysis corresponding to the emission reduction results from gross deforestation in Ecuador on a national scale from the period of 2009-2014 in comparison with a reference emission level of gross deforestation from 2000 to 2008, which was presented and evaluated by the UNFCCC in 2015. This evaluation covers 100% of our national territory. It's taken from our historical map of deforestation, and we actually have national emission factors for 9 forest types. And so this is very important for Ecuador because this has permitted us to be able to receive result-based payments in RED. During the period of 2009 to 2014, the activity data showed that we had 97,918 hectares per year of gross deforestation. The results basically tell us that the emission reduction has been of 4.8 million tons of CO2 per year reduced from the period of 2008 to 2014. And the sum of this reduction of the different years corresponds to 28.9 million tons per year. For us, this is very important, as I mentioned. This technical annex went through a process of analysis and consultation by experts of the UNFCCC from December of 2016 to May 2017. and points out that the data and information provided by Ecuador in the annex are transparent and consistent over time, and with the forest emission reference level assessed, was established in accordance to the different decisions made by the convention. And also Ecuador has determined that the present actions about the results of the reduction emissions from the implementation of REDD+ are voluntary and exclusively for the purpose of obtaining and receiving payments based on results according to the decisions like the 13/CP.19 paragraph 2 and others made in the convention. This is basically what I wanted to present, and very quickly to let you know what the process of technical analysis was, where we had the different reviews, feedback back and forth through the ICA process. And basically we finished our feedback and draft summary report on the 31st of July, basically taking us a little over 6 months. So this is basically what I can tell you about our board for the year 2010, presented in 2015. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shiriboa. Thank you for your presentation. And now I would like to expeditely open the floor for the questions, since we only left 15 minutes actually in questions and for the discussions. So the floor is open. EU, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Congratulations, Ecuador, for your BUR. And I think it was an excellent presentation today, really informative. So thank you very much for that. It is clear from your BUR that climate change is very important and is really embedded in your own constitution. You presented now the proposed MRV system, which answers some of our written questions. My question now is how did you come up with that system in a way? How has the ICA process helped or contributed in any way? Have there been any positive outcomes of this ICA process in developing this MRV system or in building capacities and experiences? If you can elaborate on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Germany, please.
Thank you, Chair. And as the previous speaker, I would like to thank Ecuador for the excellent and comprehensive presentation, and also for already addressing many of the questions that we had already sent beforehand, and also commend you for the progress in updating the GHG inventory of previous years, but also in the arrangements that you have in place. Especially the development of an institutional platform that you showed for sharing of data and information as part of a GHG inventory system. So we would be interested to know if you could elaborate a bit more, and following also the question from the EU about your experiences in developing this system, but in particular to highlight maybe what are the key elements that will help you to institutionalize the processes and to maintain the system in a way that it will support the country in doing its report on a sustained and continuous basis. And also related to that, we noted you have an improvement plan in your BUR, and we would be interested to know to what extent this institutional platform will assist you in addressing the identified improvements in a systematic manner in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. China, please.
Thank you. And also thanks Ecuador for presenting us a very comprehensive report, as well as this very colorful and user-friendly presentation. We really like the different logos. And China also want to join with the previous comments made by our European Union's colleagues about the MRV system. And that's because we, as China, also working our own MRV system and want them to help us better compiling our GHG inventories as well as the mitigation actions. So our questions to Ecuador is, you mentioned that in the MRV system, you have a section for the GHG inventories. And how does that help for you compiling the inventories, such like in regards to the data collections? Do you use the platform for the data collections or coordination work? Or at this moment, it's just only for archive purpose? And our second question is also related to your trend analysis, as you mentioned, between 1994 to 2006. We feel that's a very big efforts made by Ecuador as a developing country, since China also faced difficulties in producing this trend analysis. So we would appreciate Ecuador for sharing more experiences in producing the trend analysis in regards to the data collections as well as the coordination work among the different ministries for providing those data. Thank you.
Thank you, China. Now Indonesia, please. And then I would like to ask Ecuador to respond to this first set of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you also to Ecuador for its very interesting presentation. And I also would like to congratulate Ecuador for the submission of the first BUR. I have a question on the institutional arrangement. As on the screen you have mentioned, there is an institutional arrangement for GHG inventory. I would like to have more information on the institutional arrangement for MRV. Does the every related ministry do their own mitigation action, and then how they report it? Are those reports then collected by Minister of Environment and under the institution that's chaired by Minister of Environment? And the other question, I also have similar question like EU and also China on the proposed MRV system. Do you have any plan to use this system for supporting the preparation for the next BUR and national communication? Indonesia also now in the process of developing our national registry system. So if you could elaborate more, it is also very important for us to learn from you. Thank you.
Yes, Ecuador, please.
Thank you. Well, first of all, answering to the European Union, how did we come up with this system? Well, basically, it came, I think, from analyzing how our committee was generated and how our coordination system was generated. And so we started seeing the necessity to, first of all, automatize the information and make sure that we had a system that would, first of all, be permanent, that it didn't necessarily depend on who was on the other side giving the information, in the sense that, you know, we always have changes in technical teams in the different ministries. And so obviously somebody has to give the inputs, but we found it necessary to generate a system based, first of all, on the information that needed to be processed. Also, the system has a processing part that is in a certain phase looking to be automatized. It hasn't been yet. So we're looking for funds to keep working in the, we have the processes already set up. What we need is to make it, I don't know how you would say it, online. We need to automatize it. And so we did this, and now what we're looking for is also to have the reporting system from the different ministries that goes into this MRV system. And so it's I think came out of the necessity of making sure that everybody reports what they're doing. And that's basically how it came up. In terms of the ICA process, I think it was mostly a feedback questions and answers, there wasn't really a lot of strengthening of capacities at that point. I think earlier with the different consultations that we made with the experts, there was a lot of feedback, and I think there was a lot of important exchange and strengthening of capacities at that point. But the ICA was the final step of revision, and so I think we do need to differentiate those two moments. In terms of Germany's question on the institutionalization and how this system will help sustain the process, we believe that, first of all, the capacity building that we've generated with the different ministries, and also having a step-by-step process already set up that is understandable for the different technical teams in the different ministries, help to make sure that this process happens. And so we do believe that having an online system, or a system in general, helps institutionalize, because it doesn't depend on the person or on a consultant. Because in the last inventory greenhouse that we have been doing for the greenhouse gas emissions, they've been consultants. And the information hasn't stayed in the ministries. And so now we're working in a different way. We have the different ministerial technical teams within a working group. They get capacity building. We have worked a lot with them in different workshops. They will put in the information into the system. Obviously, we have a team from the Ministry of Environment reviewing this information to make sure that it is according to what it needs to be. And then obviously doing the different calculations. And so we do believe this is very important. In terms of the improvement plan that we have submitted, the information system is part of this improvement plan, actually, which we think will help a lot on overcoming some of the issues we have had in terms of the information, lack of information, and also coordination. China's question about how this MRV system will help with data recollection, or if it's more of a coordination, I think it's both. More it's collecting information. The coordination usually happens at another level, where we have our working group. And now that we have proposed to also have private sector and as well as civil society join in a certain place to help us with this, I think it will also be much more helpful. And in terms of the trend analysis that we presented, I do have to say it was not easy to understand, and we actually have some studies that need to be done in terms of why things shifted, because in Ecuador you do have a shift in terms of our trend, and you can see, for example, that the industrial sector, and I think it's as we increase our development, we see an increase in the industrial energy sector as well as in our mobility sector, but where we've seen an important reduction is in our LULUCF. It's because of the different measures that have been taken and how the country is actually developing and growing. But in a more technical basis, it helped to, first of all, do the actualization of the inventory with the different new information that we have had. Why? Because Ecuador, since 2008, generated a new information system. And so we've been able to gather and strengthen the information that we had. And so we did have a lot of improvements on the inventories from the past years. And so this helped a lot to do our trend analysis. In terms of the questions asked by Indonesia, the institutional arrangements, basically what we have is this working group with the different ministries. And this has really helped a lot to collect the information from the different ministries. But the very first step has been to strengthen capacities, because many of our ministries do not understand what this is about. And they haven't necessarily focused on understanding the emission sector. I do have to say that a big improvement that is always important is this cross-cutting sectorial vision. Many of the ministries always say, but that's the Ministry of Environment's job. You need to do that. But we need your information. And so it's just making sure that the policy decision makers understand the need of this information, and then everything else basically flows. We are planning to use, in the extent that we can, the system for the next biennial report. Since we don't have all of it automated, we only have a very small part because of lack of resources. We will try to apply as an initial piloting to see how it works. But we do hope that during the process of our next biennial report, we get more funds so that we can keep building the MRV system and be able to come back to you in a couple of years and tell you our lessons learned in the implementation of the MRV system and automatized MRV system.
Thank you, Ecuador. Now we have 4 parties on the list, actually in the following order: the US, India, Switzerland, and Turkey. Then the round will be closed for the questions. And actually, I will really appreciate also Ecuador for if it is able for them to just respond all these questions in a very succinct way. And I will really appreciate if you can just briefly ask now your questions because we are really running out of time for this section because there are 3 more parties. So US, please.
Hi, thank you, Ecuador, for that very good overview. Our question was on understanding if there were any tools that you've used that facilitated the compilation of the BUR, and also understanding if there are any tools that you've developed that you think could be transferred or scaled up to other countries, maybe even starting with the design of this system that you've developed. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, India, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. We compliment Ecuador for excellent and comprehensive presentation. It's very heartening to note that you have increased your protected areas from 50 to 53. And we also share one point with you that we are also one of the 17 mega diverse countries, and nearly 12% of all our emissions are offset by forests. So we were just curious, what is the number in your case? How much does the forest contribute to absorption of the total emissions? The other point is, just out of curiosity, with abundant sunshine, would you have plans to increase your renewable energy and any plans to join the ISA? Thank you.
Thank you. India and Switzerland, please.
Switzerland would like to commend Ecuador for its informative report, and thank you for the presentation. That was been very helpful. We have 2 short questions. The first is with regard to Lulu CF. As there is 30% contribution in 2010 of this sector, it plays an important role in the overall emission balance to Ecuador. Could Ecuador elaborate on how emissions are going to develop in the coming time frame? And the second is with respect to reporting on greenhouse gases. There are still some additional information that might be interesting to monitor, speaking about the information on fluorinated gases, for instance. Is it intended to add this information to future reports? Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. And Turkey, please.
Turkey would like to thank Ecuador for the very fine and detailed presentation, and also congratulate on going through the process. We do have just one single question. as follows. What's the overall time frame in achieving the 5 specific objectives regarding the mitigation strategy stated in the National Strategy on Climate Change? Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey. And now Ecuador, please, for responding to the questions.
Well, first of all, to answer the United States, basically, well, I have to say that we have tools that we generate in terms of in-country to gather the different information. We would have to analyze, sometimes it's very basic. I think the main tools is what we have generated in terms of the processes that are being set up or that are set up for the for our MRV system. And there we have different steps, different methodological steps. And so I think that could be something interesting to be able to share more specifically. What would be important also is to understand later once we are able to implement it, to see how well this has worked. Or I'm sure we will have to fix some of the procedures because sometimes this happens once you actually implement a system. So I think the different tools that were generated during the biennial analysis have been set up within the MRV system and could be shared. In terms of India, how much does forest contribute to absorption of CO2? We don't have that analysis yet. We are also actually working, I would like to mention this year we began our analysis on forest degradation. And so it's important to keep analyzing this information and reminding that our tropical forests have many different types. And so we still are working also on the different inventory. Sorry, I forgot the word, but we're also working on getting our reference for the degradation. In terms of increase of renewable energy, for us, it would be great to get to 100%. This year, we will be at a 90% of renewable energy. It's always difficult in terms of accessing financing for this. It would be great to be able to reach these we have a 10% that we need to cover, but right now Ecuador does have a financial problem, and I think that in the very short term it will be very difficult to reach that 100% of renewable energy. I think that's something that would be our goal, but we need to have financial help for that. Switzerland's question on how we are projecting our emissions in terms of LULUCF in the future. I would like to mention that, yes, in our 2010 inventory, we had a 30%. Well, now in the 2012 inventory, that percentage had a 5% down. Basically, that sector had 25% in terms of the global emissions in Ecuador. So we do expect it to keep coming down because Ecuador has been working very hard on the conservation of our forest, on our reforestation programs. And so we are actually regenerating the strategy for reforestation. And so this is something very important to us. And we do believe that it's going to keep coming down. And this also, and thanks for the international cooperation, this is very necessary for this sector also. In terms of the fluorinated gases, I wanted to mention that Ecuador does not produce these gases. We import all of them, and we do have an improvement plan for this where we are looking to make sure we have the institutional arrangements to have the information from the importing authorities to make sure that we have the information of how much of these gases are going into the country so that we can actually report in that sense. But I did want to emphasize that they are not generated in our country. We do not produce them. And in terms of the time frame for our, I think it was for the implementation of our mitigation plan. In general, as you may see, we have been implementing in the different sectors. We are actually working right now on generating a new mitigation plan that will also focus on our NDC voluntary contribution in terms of emission reductions, and also on improvement of the different sectors and understanding of how we can reduce emissions without affecting our economic development. And so this is something that we're actually working on right now, and we're also linking it with adaptation. For us, it is very important to work on both things at the same time.
Thank you, Ecuador. Thank you for your answers and presentation, and I also would like to thank all the parties for their questions. Now, I would like to invite a representative from Georgia, Ms. Kakaperi Midwani, from the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources Protection of Georgia, to deliver his presentation, and I will really appreciate if you can conclude your presentation in 15 minutes. Thank you. You have the floor, Georgia.
Thank you, dear Chair. Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen. And on behalf of the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources Protection of Georgia, I'm honored to represent to you the BUR document, first BUR report. At the beginning, I'd like to outline what we are going to talk about the next 15 minutes. So it's about the first part of the key line summary outline of the BUR and key messages which we want to deliver to the international community of climate. Second part, I will address the lessons learned and the experience received from this new ICA process. And at the end of the presentation, I'd like to address few questions which we received from the parties. And here I'd like to thank you, all of the parties who have read our report and had an interesting questions for us. So let's begin with the summary of BUR report and what kind of recent development we have here. We're talking about the Georgia, which has a population about 3.7 million. Yeah, okay. 3.7 million, and most of the population lives in urban areas. The total area of the country is 69,700 square kilometers, and 40% of this area covered by the forest. Also, the 37% of the area is used for the agricultural purposes. In a climate perspective, we have a subtropical and continental climate, and you also can see here briefly the economic profile of the country. GDP per capita, and FTA value. So if we move to the report and how we developed our BUR, this goes to the institutional arrangement. And in its initial phase, we had the government of Georgia who delegated the responsibility to complete the project of BUR delivered to the Ministry of Environment, which was funded by the Global Environment Facility and implemented by the UNDP. Also, in order to enhance the implementation of the process, there was assigned the project board, which was consist of different representatives of the different ministries. And also, there was a technical group, Environmental Information and Education Center, and also the project team, who did the who did the technical work. At the level of data collection, the activity data providers, such as the key line ministries, public and private companies, and legal entities, has provided the data, which was analyzed and drafted the first BUR report. And the quality control process has done by the team who was worked on the document. After the drafting the first version of the BUR, it was delivered to the external entity for the quality assurance process, and at the same time project board for the comments. The final comments was reflected the final document, and for submissions, all hierarchical level was involved in the process. And the first biennial update report of Georgia has submitted to UNFCCC Secretariat. Afterwards, we had a new phase, which was the ICA process, and the ministry as a focal point was the key deliverer of this process. And the team of technical team of the project was involved in both aspects during the technical team of review, answering the questions, and also received the questions before the FSV session. And now we are here in the FSV session. So what are the key delivers of the GHG inventory? We see that the country's highest emission comes from the energy sector, followed by the industry, agriculture, and waste. And in the LULUCF sector, we still had in 2013 25 emission sequestration of the total emissions. And the total emission that time for Georgia was 16,391 gigagram of CO2 equivalent. So if we look at this number, in a trend manner where we have the emission decline after the collapse of the old economic system, and the economic during the economic transition period, we had a slightly upwarding trend. So in 2015, Georgia has represented its intended national determined contribution, while we had a business as usual scenario and deviation from the business as usual scenario by 15% for 2030 and extra 10% as a conditional commitment. In order to achieve this mitigation result, the several tasks has already implemented. The first of all, the energy credits for renewable energy and energy efficiency project has received about 0.1 emission reduction in 2015-2016 period. We also expect by 2020 that country will continue the reduction pattern from the business as usual scenario, and will reach about 6% by the activities under the Covenant of Mayors and signatory cities of this European initiative, and also the project of biomass utilization in the country. So we also have the project we also have an action plan which called the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan, and the projection of if all activities will be taken into account, we will see that the emission reductions for about 13% by 2030. So next, what I would like to talk about it's about the description of our domestic MRV system. Our domestic MRV system has three main pillars. First one is about the MRV for inventory. Second one is MRV for mitigation actions, and MRV for support. In a slide, I had different colors of the activities and measures under this system, and these colors was contributed the activities that is already in place, the activities that needs to be improved in order to meet NDC tracking feature. And also we have the elements that is not existing in the country and needs to be elaborated. First of all, these activities mostly are the measurement procedures. So how can the measurements can be implemented, and also how the measurement report can be delivered to the coordinating entity, all of this MRV process. Then this is the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources Protection of the country. Since we're addressing the topic where we're covering different sectors such as the agriculture, energy, and economic development, we need other line ministries. So that goes beyond the responsibility of Ministry of Environment. Accordingly, our colleague line ministries would be better to be incorporated in the recommending body, interministerial, such would be an interministerial committee. So of course, since we have the things have to develop under the MRV system, and some things that is not there and needs to be created, this drives us to analyze the obstacles and barriers we have in the country. If we group these obstacles and barriers, we see that absence of legal framework for climate-related data management, limited number of long-term sectoral strategies and policies, and limited access to the data necessary for the high-tier methods is the key barriers and obstacles for the country. We have also already received the support from the countries, and we are thankful for these countries to overcome these barriers. And last 5 years analysis shows that approximately 40 million USDs has mobilized for the partner countries and also the international companies to have an improvement projects in energy efficiency field, in transport, renewable energy, and also in adaptation sector. Of course, we still need a support in order to address and meet the goals, which is assigned in several strategic documents, which is currently countries working on it. First of all, is low emission development strategy, which tell us to develop, tell us to work towards the development of financial schemes for priority economic niches. Also, National Energy Efficiency Action Plan triggers the facilitation of the technology transfer. Georgia's adaptation agricultural development strategy tells us to develop smart agricultural methods in the country. LULUCF sector needs to have a research in a land use change source category, and sustainable energy action plans developed by this Covenant of Mayor signatory cities facilitate the local initiatives in order to have bottom-up approaches in future. So I reached my second part of the presentation, which is about the preparing for the ICA process. And the added value which we received from this process is to have a understanding that GHG inventory will take a permanent nature. Also, we think about, and we are in a process to implement, multi-stakeholder, multi-level, and multi-sector discussions. Stimulation of the mid- and long-term policy planning. This is another added value which ICA process triggers. Support the alignment of key sectoral policies and strategies is another key aspect which we appreciate. And last but not least, the enhanced overarching national MRV system. So if we look at in a deeper manner, we had a dialogue several levels in the ICA during the ICA process. First was the dialogue with TTE members, and it was from us the opportunity to inform them about the national circumstances and discuss on this issue with them. And deliverable was something with different vision and different angle, how to solve the problems, how to address the problems, which is the perfect example of transparency. Next thing is about the summary report. Summary report, which is considered by Georgia as a guiding, which has a guiding nature. It allowed us to identify immediate improvements and also have a vision what would be addressed in a long-term perspective. That help us to work in a completeness manner. And the last thing is a dialogue with parties, which we are now doing. The platform of communicate on achievements and the future plans, what country, what Georgia has. This is our accountability to the International Climate Society. And the last part of my presentation is about the response to the questions received. We received about 15 questions, but I would like to highlight 2 of them. First question received from the United States was about the students' involvement in GHG inventory development. So during the project implementation, we worked, we tried to have an internship program. Okay, thank you. So internship program, which has 2 main pillars: training on GHG inventory and practical work package, which included development of questionnaires, gathering the responses, and support the calculation of emissions by the interns. So this is something that they learned during the training program and practically used by the project to have a little bit distributed the activities among the team, among the experts of sectors and the interns who supported them. So key findings of this initiative was to attract new generation in a climate field, support the climate change labor market with advanced knowledge experts, additional human resources for the project itself, which is an immediate result, and developed practice-oriented study materials in a climate field. And the second question, which I would like to show to you, is received from the Switzerland. It was about the plans for the reduction of uncertainty associated with GHG inventory. And we are appreciated for this question because uncertainty is something that really matters for the accuracy of the process. We have a plan to develop action plan for the reduction of uncertainty at a key source category levels, which considers the implement the statistical methods for improving the accuracy data. Also, the second main pillar of this is to work on the in-country emission factors to identify them. And the last one would be to enhance the data collection system, which still needs to be improved in the country. So that was my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention and looking forward to receive some questions.
I really would like to thank you, Mr. Kakabari Midvani, for his presentation. And now I open the floor for the questions from the parties. I see Turkey and then Germany. Now Turkey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Georgia for the fine presentation and detailed presentation, and also for the efforts taken going through the process. Congratulations. My single question would be as follows. We would like to ask what the main possible challenge Georgia expect would be achieving the unconditional 15% emission reduction objective below the business as usual scenario by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey. Now Germany, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, also congratulations for the first BUR and your hard work done on establishing a domestic MRV system. And also thank you again for already answering all of our questions in writing that we had submitted beforehand. We would like, however, to hear a little more about your institutional arrangements, which you had comprehensively described, especially about any challenges and lessons learned on how this system assists you in reporting on progress on policies and mitigation actions. And related to this, we noted that you reported on some greenhouse gas reduction goals based on local initiatives that also you described. And could you indicate maybe what kind of instruments the country is using to ensure that local communities' involvement helps in achievement of these national mitigation goals? Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. Now China, please.
Thank you. And also, I want to thank Georgia for providing us this very comprehensive information and also very clear and structured slides, although we missed most of them, but I can see their efforts here. So actually, as part of the TTE team for the Georgia, in this process, I feel a very good collaboration with the parties from Georgia to work on this whole ICA process. And during the technical analysis, we just figured out many informations are presented in a very comprehensive way. And specifically, they have a national inventory report to increase the transparency of this. And we just have one question related to the support received, because we figure out there's some information gap in Georgia's report in regards to support received on the technology and transfer. Because in China, we also have faced difficulties to provide a very full and comprehensive picture of the support we received. So we appreciate Georgia to give us more information on how they would increase this information in regards to their MRV systems, whether they have these MRV systems monitoring the support they received from the other parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Switzerland, please.
Thank you, Georgia, for the speech and the efforts that your country has made. Thank you also for the answers that you provided beforehand. My short question, in line with reporting guidelines from non-Annex 1 parties, Georgia submitted the inventory for the calendar year no more than 4 years before the date of the submission. For Georgia's next BUR and NC, would it be technically feasible to submit an inventory for the calendar year no more than 3 or 2 years prior to the date of the submission? What are the main challenges Georgia is facing that prevent it from submitting more recent inventory data?
Thank you. Now I would like to turn to Georgia to respond to these set of questions. Then we will go for further questions.
Thank you, dear Chair, and thank you, the countries, for this comprehensive questions. Let me address directly now with Turkey. So the main challenge to have the 50% deviation as an unconditional commitment is something that we are facing. First of all, it is to have and align the key economic development priorities, which is contribute something that is related to climate change. For instance, in energy sector, if there is a transformational processes going on, and we see that there is going on these processes, and National Energy Efficiency Action Plan is one of the bright example of this, needs to be aligned with the climate change. And one of the key aspect that needs to be taken into account during the implementation of this kind of strategies, there needs to be involved the aspect of measurement of emission deviations, so a mitigation effect, what kind of mitigation effect we would have there. The second challenge is to show the key line ministries and our private sector what is the multiple benefits they have, so they can achieve from addressing the climate change mitigation measures. And at a technical level, the problem and challenge would be for the country to have an adequate system of experts who will work on these directions. So let me move to Chairman's questions. So the challenging for the reporting of the mitigation actions and policy actions. We really see that there is still challenges there, because sometimes we have activities that does not provide the direct emission reductions. We have the possibilities to have to develop the tool which allow us to measure the indirect emission reduction impacts. And also, what is important for us to address with the different stakeholders beyond the government sector, which also does the work on the mitigation direction, but this information sometimes is lost during the information flow process. So regarding the local communities facilitation in a climate change dialogue, that is one nice case we have in the country. This is the Covenant of Mayors, and well, we think that it needs to be supported even more to have a more bottom-up approaches in our strategies, because the real activities and measures that really reduce the emissions goes there with the cities and municipalities. So when we are talking about institutionalize this process, we have in our mind to establish the committee that would consider national at the national level, two ministries who are the coordinator of the Covenant of Mayor process. This is the Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Environment, and also the Ministry of Infrastructure, which is domestically responsible to do measures in a municipal level, and also all signatory cities and municipalities. Currently we have 18 local entities who are signed the Covenant of Mayors, and we have 11 sustainable energy efficiency action plans, which I already told you that provide about 5% emission reduction by 2020. So in order to assure that this process is kept, we need a system in the country, inside the country, that would be not too much formal, sort of informal elements where the local representatives can sit together with the national representatives and talk about the main challenges and pillars which they have in the country and how to address these issues. Thanks for China for the question regarding the support received and technology transfer complications. We definitely do have this challenging issue in the country. If it is possible to ask the Secretariat to put on the slide 9 on screen, I can show you easily that support MRV system, which has a pillar of support received and needed for the countries. The most parties who are involved is the Ministry of Finance and donor organizations, and also we need to work about the development of the reporting system, how this information should be transferred to the ministry. Another thing is about what the country wants to address. the finances, that is, and financial support signed by the government and received in a budget, or we are going to cover as well the private negotiations and private companies that are also receiving some kind of support from their partners, international partners. So this is something in a subject of discussion. And in a slide you see that this is a blue color, and blue color means that it exists somehow, since you already seen in a BOR report some kind of information regarding the support received, but it definitely needs to be enhanced. And in this system we see that Ministry of Environment would be a main deliverable of this information. Regarding the last about the Switzerland question, thank you very much for encouraging us to be even more ambitious in submitting of the national GHG inventory. In accordance to the plan we have, now we are going to address about 3-4 year difference of the submission year and the inventory conducted years. And in the future, we are going also to continue this inventory process under the national communication, which is going to finalize by 2021. And also that means that we will get even closer with the reporting year and the inventory year. So that time we would expect we will have about 3-2 year differences. So the key challenges we have here, of course, we are relying on the National Statistics Office of the country, and National Statistics Office provide in energy sector the data such as energy balance. So that needs to be reported in a technical level. That needs to be reported in order to allow our technical staff to work the emission calculations for the energy sector. Another thing is about the industry sector. Now we have the 4 years difference, and we already touched the confidentiality issues. 4-year difference is something that is still negotiable. That is a questionable what would be if we have a 2 years and 1 year differences. So with the difference between the reporting and the production years. So that would goes with the confidentiality highly. So we already tested how to address the confidentiality in our BOR report, and it was for the steel production. And we are going to enhance this direction if this request will come from the factories. Thank you very much for these questions at this time.
Thank you. Actually, there will be some other questions. First, Japan, please.
Thank you, and thank you for your excellent presentation, and congratulations on successful submission of BOR. I have just one question. We believe that Georgia has to establish a sustainable MRV systems to continuously prepare BORs. So could you please share your lessons learned and the challenges from that experience? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan. And Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Georgia, for great presentation. I have one question. You mentioned 3 obstacles and barriers in your presentation, but I did not see any improvement plan. So if you have, just to tell us briefly. Thank you.
Thank you, Korea. Now India, please.
Congratulations, Georgia, for very good presentation. Chapter 3.9 of BOR of yours presents details of GHG inventory from the LU-LUCF sector. The land use categories totals to the geographical area of your country indicated in table 3.11. However, difference between the total area of the country and country's land area has not been explained. Could you please do so? Thank you.
Thank you, India. And now, distinguished delegate from Georgia, you have the floor for the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Chair and countries, for the questions. Japan, thank you for the question. And regarding the MRV system, what kind of sustainable approach we have here, and what trigger us to make it more sustainable. This is first of all to have a board which allow the ministry to work with the different directions which goes beyond their mandate. That is the first thing that absolutely needs to be addressed. Second one, and I would like to join here the Korea's question as well, because we're in a plan to solve the problems we have and obstacles we have there. This is mostly related to the inventory MRV system, and we are missing here the legislation portfolio, so which legal framework for the climate-related data management. That goes for the not only the inventory, that mostly goes with the inventory, so to have a permanent data provision procedures. We have a project for this. The project works, project funded by the Global Environment Facility, and this project tries to address the issue how to make the data flow system in a how to digitalize this process. So this is one thing we try to improve, and another thing that we need legal support to have a mitigation portfolio in the country to enhance the reporting system under the mitigation portfolio. What I would like to mention here, the key challenge, we have the measurement reporting system. So this is totally new one, which we need to build up. Of course, some elements can be used from the CDM mechanism, but anyway, this is still new one because we have a dilemma here. How to address this measurement system? Do we want just to receive the information from the implementer organizations, or do we need an inspection part as well in the process? So this is something that needs to be solved in future. And lastly, I would like to give my thanks to the India for the question on LULUCF sector, which is, I would like to tell you, the bottleneck for our inventory. Currently, the difference, what you just mentioned here, mostly caused of the reality what we have in the country. The almost 2 decades, there was not happening the cadastre of the land use sector. So the forest sector is under this. So the forest, we do not have the comprehensive information. How we are going to address this? And now there is going on a project which gonna finalize into next year, and it will cover the whole inventory of the forest areas of the country, and we will have an updated information. The challenge still remains that goes with the land use change category, since in order to assess the land use change, we need the time series data, which is not existing. So there would be a possibility to consider the expert judgment in this regard, how to address this issue, how to cover it, where we can do extrapolations, where we can have an expert judgment there, but it is still under the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much also to you and all the parties for the questions, and also for you for your answers. Now let's move on to the next party, Jamaica. I would like to invite a representative from Jamaica, Mr. Clifford Mahloin, Project Administrator, to deliver his brief presentation. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Maybe just 1 minute.
Distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Secretariat, I would like to apologize, and in particular to apologize to the distinguished delegation from Georgia for the technical problems that we had. We tried to innovate and use modern tools, but sometimes this leads to this. There were some problems with the Skype in general, and this led to this technical issue. But I can reassure you that, again, all the presentations will be available on the web. So for those who are interested in technical details of this very, very sophisticated presentation, I'm really sorry that I also couldn't see it in live, will be able to access it. Once again,
thank you very much. Let me begin certainly by expressing our appreciation for the kind words with respect to efficient we were in completing this exercise. But then when we are from a country that is used to setting records, I suppose it comes naturally. All right, I have a very short presentation. The outline is a generic one. We have part one is a summary of the BUR and recent developments. Part two, experiences and lessons learned in participating in the ICA process. And the three will respond to some questions, and we are very happy for the number. We got about 20 questions from parties, and we are very appreciative. Sorry. Okay, institutional arrangement. The Climate Change Division, which was established in 2013 in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, is Jamaica's focal point to the UNFCCC and has that responsibility for the preparation and submissions of Jamaica's biennial update report. Now, Jamaica is a small island developing state, which is located in the Caribbean Sea. We are south of the country of Cuba, and we have a population of some 2.7 million persons. And this is based on the 2016 census that was done by our Statistical Institute in Jamaica. We are about 11,000 square miles when you look at our land space and the economic zone. We're a tropical climate. We're 18 degrees north of the equator. We have a very hilly interior and a very narrow coastal plain. Our system of government is basically two major parties, and the current Prime Minister, Mr. Honorable Andrew Onis, is from the Jamaica Labour Party. Jamaica is south of Cuba, it's right in the center of the picture. We're southeastern United States, the state of Florida. North of us is Cuba. To the northeast is Hispaniola, which is Haiti and Dominican Republic. And to the south of us is Central America and part of South America, northern part of South America. And to the southwest is Mexico. So that's where we are, right in the center of the Caribbean Sea. With respect to our emissions profile, it's on screen for the last 5-6 years or so, from 2006 to 2012. You can see CO2 has been fluctuating a little bit. It was high up over 11,000 gigagrams per CO2 equivalent. To the last inventory, which in 2012, it's down to 7,000. And you can see for the other gases, methane, nitrous oxide, and others. So in total, if we have land use change and forestry included at the sinks, you see we range from about 16,000, 19,000 tons, 16,000 tons to currently about 13,000 or 14,000 tons. The main source of our emissions, obviously, like many other countries, it's from the generation of electricity. Most of that traditionally is done through the use of imported fossil fuels, but that has been changing. And the transport sector has in recent years seen an increase in their levels of greenhouse gas emissions, particularly carbon dioxide. Now, mitigation actions, we have so far focused on the energy sector, the transportation sector, and the forestry sector. We have one CDM registered activity, which is a wind farm that we have in the parish of Manchester. In the first phase, it was 39, that's about 39 megawatts. There's a second phase that I've been having, which is just about 24 megawatts. We have developed a few NAMAs. One that has been completed is one for the energy sector. I understand it's now in the process. We don't have a NAMA for the transportation sector, but what we have been doing is that we have been looking at doing a fuel switching of the transportation sector. The main bus company, the Jamaican Urban Transport Company, to see if we can move that from fossil fuels, well, from more intense carbon intensive fossil fuels to LNG. And that is work currently in the process. The wind farm itself, it has the ability, when it was established, the numbers that we could reduce consumption of fossil fuels by about 37,000 barrels per year. And all of the energy that is produced at this wind farm, the main wind farm, there are some smaller ones, is sold to the grid. Now, a domestic system for MRV is quote unquote loosely been established. We haven't yet gone into getting a formal MRV system up and running, as can be seen from some of the examples of the previous presentations. But what we have done in this project that we have to complete to prepare the biennial update report, which we are also completing the preparation of our third national communication, is that we have established a database for archiving and calculating and presenting on GHG emissions. As we speak, it has just been installed. So when we get back, myself and my colleague, Mr. Alcock, who is the mitigation specialist in the climate change division, is how we're going to start populating that system, so that when we do our second BUR, we may be able to complete this in a more efficient manner. At least we will start the process for the data collection long before the actual preparation. Obstacles and barriers. Well, the main obstacle we have found with the preparation of the first BUR is with data collection, and I don't think that is unique to us. The data as it is collected now, the relevant data activity, is not collected, has anything to do with GHG inventory. So the format that it is collected on, in most of the instances, is just not suitable for what it will be needed. So we are thinking, part of the planning forward is to develop a common reporting format that will be quite useful for preparing the GHG inventory. This fits with the installation of the database, because we intend to either get that information directly online from the data providers, that they can access the system and input the data, or it has to be collected and then entered in at the climate change division. So part of that process is to develop a reporting system. Then there's getting suitable experts. Most of the experts that we have in preparing, particularly the GHG inventory, comes from overseas. We have not yet been able to build that capacity sufficiently in Jamaica, so that we can find suitable capacities just within the borders. But the inventory experts that we use, the process that we have done for the inventories that we have done so far, is that we work through national experts. So we find 5 sector experts. These are persons who are very well versed in the operations of the relevant sectors, whether it's energy, waste, land use change, agriculture, or industrial processes. And then they do the data collection. They do part of the calculations for the particular sector, and they work through the experts. So that has worked so well so far, but we need now to get most of this been done within the borders. I put the establishment of the climate change division because previously the Met Service was responsible for these activities, but this was the first time that the climate change division is doing this. The establishment of the division is not an obstacle, but the fact that they have been doing it for the first time, so they are now over that hump, that they have done this, and they are prepared to do the others. Support received. Well, some capacities were developed mainly through this process of preparing the reporting requirements, but it's not sufficient. It's just to introduce people to the IPCC methodology. I think in the most, it's a 2-day workshop where you bring people in, but just really to introduce the data providers in particular and other interested. We have other interested participants. Ideally, we would like to have a full 2-week workshop organized to actually go into the methodology and certify people at the end of that, and to have this process included in the school curriculum. There are several climate change postgraduate degrees now that have been established, and we think that certainly there's been one for years with respect to renewable energy that we could introduce as part of those topics, a module with respect to preparing GHG inventories. Okay, so that is for the future. All right, preparing for the ICA process. This is totally new to us. It's a learning by doing process. So, for example, participation is not extended beyond the persons in the climate change division, which is myself and Mr. Alcock and our principal director, who unfortunately is traveling to Bonn at this time. So it hasn't gone beyond that mainly, and the national experts. Not even them were so much involved in this ICA process. The GHG expert himself was, but we haven't really. We are working on how to do this right. The BUR preparation, it has stirred some interest, particularly from the sectors that have been involved, and from other persons that have required and have received copies of the biennial update report, whether they're doing research or they're preparing papers, or they're just interested in looking at Jamaica's emissions profile. But there's a lot more to be done, but it has generated some interest. Transparency. What is the value that's added? Certainly, we have informed the internal planning and prioritization process. Within the ministry itself, the BUR is recognized as a success story. We presented it last year in Marrakesh to the executive secretary. We had the Minister of Foreign Affairs doing that, so it has been on the web page. So the ministry itself, through the media itself, that information has gone out, but probably a lot more needs to be done. We have hopefully to facilitate continuous improvement over time and enhance prioritization of capacity needs for participation in the process. As I said, between the project manager and project coordinator, most of the action, but we intend to spread that further. But institutional strengthening is a big gap and a big issue for us. And it comes out in all of the issues, some of the questions that have been asked. And the reason for this is simply that we are under IMF, International Monetary Fund extended program, and part of that is that you in fact should be decreasing the size of your public sector. So we can't bring in any new posts into the public sector at the moment, and this would be the solution to actually develop a post in the climate change division for reporting requirements, including BR. But we have a moratorium now on hiring in the public sector. So that is restricting that somewhat. So we still have to work on a project by project basis. As I say, learning by doing. Okay, let's come to the real meat of the matter, the questions. I've categorized them as such for brevity. The first one, look at gaps and constraints, which came from Egypt. It asked if we had a plan for investments in technology transfer and capacity building. Quick answer is no. But certainly such a plan will be useful, and we'll be looking at how we can start looking at developing this as we go forward. We actually have a finance person in the climate change division, but we never thought that we should include investments in tech and capacity building as part of her portfolio, but this is something we'll look at further. Mitigation action we have fixed. We have a number of questions, the US, Egypt, and others, European Union. Quickly, the answers are in red. How we intend to implement mitigation action. We do that through the implementation of Jamaica's national energy policy. The Office of Utility Regulation makes calls for proposals for things like renewable energy sources, and we've been successful so far. We have a 30%, we had a 20% target for renewables by 2025, I think, but we have been getting so successful that we have moved on now to 30% by 2030. We are looking at fuel switch. We have moved hugely. The public service, the main power company, has actually is now in the process of building a power plant that will be using LNG as a source, and we have had some good activities that will establish an LNG hub in Jamaica. So we see now we can use those facilities to move to a lower carbon intensive source of fuel. The wind farm started in 2005, and that number is wrong. It should be 40 megawatts. It's not 398 megawatts. But we have had 2 additional phases, and the 3rd phase is actually going in now, almost completed. Definitely need a study that will fully assess the effects of what are the total emission reductions and what are the effects of those mitigation actions. The question was asked by a number of countries. We don't have that information available, and in fact we need to get that established, and we look at that as we go along in the future. And we have, as I said, several actions including a NAMA, energy NAMA, which is now out there seeking some funding. When we do the fuel switch with respect to the transport sector, we may start developing a NAMA from that. But certainly, we also need to do a formal assessment of all our capacities and the way we're going to try to address it. Any other information, number of questions here? Certainly, I'll answer this. Institutionalization of the reporting process is certainly a desirable way to go, but because of the circumstances, we'll still not be able to do that as yet. We have no requirements, for example, to collect information from certain sectors. For example, people deal with foam or foam blowing or something like that. It's very small, people do that, but there's no formal way to capture that information as yet. A question was asked about something I think with livestock that came from Germany and some improvement. We have asked our expert to provide that answer. We haven't received that yet. But another issue that we had with respect to livestock farming and the problem with the data is that there are a lot of small farmers who rear livestock, and it's very difficult to get that information. There's no way that the Ministry of Agriculture is collecting that information. The large farms, yes, the large dairy farms, but not the smaller holdings. Inventory, a number of questions on GHG inventory. And we are making efforts now to, sorry, someone asked a question about, okay, the first question we had in the second communication a GHG inventory from 2000 to 2005, but we were not able to create a time series with the new inventory from 2006 to 2012. And the reason is that the consultant, we never received the worksheets for that earlier inventory from the consultant. He was based in Canada, but unfortunately he has passed away, so we are still pursuing through his family to see if that information is still available, but we have not been successful yet. I think we're coming to wrap up. We have now just developed an emissions policy. It is now going through the rounds of consultations, and part of that policy we have included data collection, how to improve the data collection, how to make it more formal, how to have the data providers becoming a part of this emissions policy. So this is what we're going for, and this is will augur well for the future inventories. The prioritization would be the transport, energy sector, transport sector, agriculture, and the forestry sector. And as a reporting format, as a which we're looking at doing that. We move on. National circumstances, this came from Thailand, but it relates to MRV, which is what the other category, and there was a number of questions on MRV from a number of countries. Constraint within in the public sector, so we can fully establish an MRV system and have someone responsible for that. We realize the importance of doing that, but we're going to need some additional support as we try to fully establish MRV system. This is the last slide. Certainly need to improve the data collection. We think legal instruments, policy support, and resources would improve the preparation of inventories, and we need to certainly get lifting of the moratorium with respect to hiring staff. And the last category, just general one, yes, priorities for capacity building is in the BUR. We need a database manager now that we have established a database inventory system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jamaica. Now I would like to open the floor for the questions, brief questions from the parties. China, please.
Thank you, Chair. And we are admire for the work Jamaica has done to active in the climate change. One question is asked, can you tell us the reason that why we can see rising point at the year 2008? I mean, the total emission is higher than the year before and year after. And what action did you done to avoid this kind of rise in the later years? Thank you.
Thank you, China. Now EU, please.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations to Jamaica for the BUR as a small island in development states. Fantastic, and also for the very good and clear presentation today. I'm going to follow up on one of the bullets from your presentation. Was also one of our written questions to make sure that maybe you responded and I didn't understand correctly. But so it's about the role of planning, internal planning and prioritization. So you mentioned that the value added of the BUR and to inform the internal planning and prioritization and raise the profile of it at domestic level. And we are interested to know about this prioritization and the role of showing this perhaps multiple benefits also to stakeholders of climate change mitigation actions and policies at national level. And whether you use this also to perhaps the mobilization of financing for climate change and development activities. Not just reporting international, but also at domestic level, most interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, now Germany, please.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you very much to Jamaica for the excellent presentation and congratulations for the first BUR as the first SID. And thank you also for summarizing already in a very structured manner the questions, the answers to our questions. Especially, we noted that even you used the 2006 guidelines already, and so we commend you on that, and you say that you did that so as to be proof for the future. And we would like, even though it was mentioned in the list in your slide, but whether you could elaborate a bit more on the experience you had with this approach, with using 2006 guidelines, and how you feel that this makes you proof for the future, and to what extent you also think it's beneficial to address improvements in the future. And also I would like to ask a second question, and that is that as a small island state in the Caribbean, and in the lead up to the BUR and to developing its content, and I'm aware you already mentioned 2 workshops about the IPCC guidelines that you did as capacity building. But beyond that, did you also participate in any regional or peer-to-peer activity? And if so, which has been your experience with that? Did it help you in developing the content of the BUR, and could you benefit from these activities? Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. Now, US, please.
Yeah, I just want to also extend my congratulations to Jamaica for that very good overview, and also for your very transparent BUR, and also consistent with my colleagues from Germany, congratulate you on application of the 2006 guidelines. Germany has already asked one question that I had in terms of following up on experience with use of those guidelines, but I also wanted to ask if there were lessons learned from application of QA/QC measures, and the BUR in particular with the inventory does elaborate on that, so it would be useful to hear lessons learned from that experience.
Thank you, yes, and I will also invite India to ask questions.
Thank you, Chairperson. India congratulates Jamaica for presenting an elaborate account of its national circumstances, the national GHG inventory, and mitigation actions. However, we find very limited information on constraints and gap, related financial, technology and capacity needs, and support required. All these have not been presented in little detail. So could our friends from Jamaica tell us what were the constraints in reporting these details? Thank you.
Thank you, India. Now I give floor to Jamaica to respond to the questions.
Thank you, Madam. Thanks for the questions. I'll try to answer what I can, and my colleague is here, he can help me out. Question from China, why 2008? We saw that rise when 2008 was the world recession, so you'd expect to see a decrease. The quick answer is that a number of, we had the bauxite sector involved up to 2008. They were quite robust. They were producing a lot of aluminium, etc., from the sector. But the market collapsed also with the world recession. So a number of bauxite plants were closed in 2008 or in 2009. So that's why you see that reduction after 2008. But a number of plants have come back now. So when we do the latest inventory, you're going to see another increase. But that really is the effect of the bauxite industry. The question from I think it's the European Union about internal planning. Well, so far the information is used mainly in developing policies so far internally. To plan forward, the inventory itself has been used to develop mitigation assessments using the LEAP model. But those outcomes were not, they were just completed a few months, last month. So they will come in the third NATCOM. So you see the effects of the feeding from the GHG inventory into our potential mitigation planning. The 2006 guidelines, to be honest, this was recommended to us by the GHG expert. This is why we used it. I can't give a better answer than that. But we knew we have a national expert, particularly one that is from the forestry sector, who has been working with the IPCC in developing some of the new guidelines, the good practices, etc. So he had recommended also that we use the 2006 guidelines, but we find it quite useful, and it has done the work. We have been involved in a number of regional workshops. However, we were so far advanced in our GHG process that when these workshops came along, it was when the other Caribbean countries were actually doing this process, but we had been way ahead of that curve. So they are useful, yes, but yeah, that's how it is. QA/QC, we haven't looked so much yet on the QA/QC part of it, yes, but we're going to be doing that when we prepare the next activities, the next biennial report. And we have had a little bit of change of staff in the mitigation aspect of the climate change division, but Mr. Alcock is now there, so we're going to be looking exactly at those Q&A, QC, and see how we can improve as we go forward. India, again, thank you for the question. Limited information on the gap, based on really capacity constraints that we couldn't go fully in depth to get those gaps and constraints being articulated in the BUR. But you'll see a lot of improvement when you see the inventory report that we have for the third national communication. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. And now, please, let's move on to Serbia. But as I see, actually, you have a very comprehensive presentation. I hope you will be presenting the most important matters through that presentation and conclude your presentation in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Even
Serbia.
I'm not from Jamaica now. I will be like Mr. Bolt, very fast. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a really pleasure to present first biannual update report of the Republic of Serbia, which, as a matter of fact, was prepared, led by the Ministry of Agriculture and Environmental Protection. Finally, and luckily, since June this year, we have a ministry in charge for environmental protection, and I believe that for the further period, this ministry will be, as a matter of fact, the institution that is going to deal with all reporting to the UNFCCC, because this is the ministry in charge for climate change related issues. Climate change division within this ministry is UNFCCC and UNFCCD, as a matter of fact, focal point, and in charge for alignment of the national with the EU acquis. Serbian Environmental Protection Agency, according to the law on air quality, is in charge for GHG inventory system, including QA/QC of activity data, analysis of key categories, improvement of inventory, etc. And since 2013, Serbian Environmental Protection Agency started to prepare inventories on a yearly basis. These calculations for the purpose of GHG inventory are, as a matter of fact, the result of data that are provided by Statistical Office, Ministry of Mining and Energy, Ministry of Interior, directly traffic police and industrial plans, but we also use FAO data for the forestry sector. When it comes to preparation of BOR, so other institutions that were involved through the working group were more or less the ministries, of course in charge for mining and energy, construction, transport, economy, interiors, Ministry of Finance as the most important. We had in a process of preparation involvement of the National Climate Change Committee, which as a matter of fact had more than 20 members from different governmental and non-governmental institutions, academia, etc. And we had technical support from faculty for mechanical engineering. So Serbia, besides that, that is the UNFCCC party. It's also Paris Agreement party since August this year. The country is a candidate for the EU accession since March 2012, and it's party to the Energy Community Treaty, which is for us quite important also from the perspective of reporting to the UNFCCC. So it's located in the central part of Balkan Peninsula, and which I need to mention, the country is quite vulnerable on climate changes. And for example, average annual temperature rise for the period since 2016 is quite above the global average annual temperatures rise. In GDP, industrial sector is the greatest contributor, followed by energy sector and agriculture. Electricity production is mostly based on combustion of domestic lignite. GHG inventory was produced using IPCC 2006 methodology, Tier 1 method, and those are the figures. I will not go in details because everything is in a document and on the slides. So we presented data based on or separated on the sectors and by gases. And we also show the trends for the period 2010-2013. We have a decrease of accumulated emissions or total national emissions. Also a decrease of the emissions by sector, with exception of waste management sector, in which there is increase of emissions. Mitigation actions are based, as a matter of fact, on targets or increase of the use of renewables or renewable energy sources. And we also are quite in compliance with the commitments or obligations that we have under the Energy Community Treaty, in which we have a target for 2020, 27% of renewables in accumulate energy consumption. So we use those targets in order to develop a scenario with measures and with additional measures in BOR up to 2020. Those measures are, as a matter of fact, followed by specific NAMA projects, mostly in solar, wind, and hydro. And the second channel for emission reduction is, as a matter of fact, increase of energy efficiency. Again, a certain commitment under the Energy Community Treaty. So those are the figures separated per sector. And in a document, we have following NAMA projects in energy efficiency, mostly in regard to improvement in building sector. NAMA registry also document BUR contains other NAMA infrastructure projects in energy sector, and those are mostly in regards to increase of energy efficiency in existing power plants, but also fuel switch and involvement of metering system for heat production. So based on these assumptions, we came to 3 scenarios. Baseline scenario, a scenario with measures shows possibility for reduction of GHG emissions for 11% up to 2020, while scenario with additional measures bring us to reduction of 18% up to 2020 compared to baseline scenario. So just to have a feeling and taking into account the questions that we received during the process, state of implementation of the actions that are, as a matter of fact, the actions proposed and expected to achieve emission reduction up to 2020. So we have increase in installment of renewables in December 2014, 45 megawatts. Mostly small hydropower, solar and wind power, also biogas power plants, and all the data in regard to renewables and activities are publicly available. This, as a matter of fact, or if you wish to look the trend, those are the data, for example, for December 2014. Those are for October 2016, and in September 2017, when you compare it with December of 2014, there is also doubled capacities installed. So when it comes to monitoring, reporting and verification, as I already mentioned, the Serbian Environmental Protection Agency is in charge for GHG inventory system. There is a legislation which provides a basis for collection of data needed for preparation of GHG inventory, but finding that this is not enough in order to follow everything else which is required by UNFCCC. We started financially supported by European Commission, the project, establishment of mechanism for implementation of the monitoring mechanism regulation, which as a matter of fact is going to bring us in a situation that we are going to have the whole monitoring system in place, which means a system needed for monitoring and reporting not only on GHG emissions, but also policies, measures, projections, adaptation. This will be prescribed by law on climate change, which is a few days ago finalized. We hope that the procedure of approval of this law will be complete or finalized in 2018, meaning that we are going to have a complete MRV system in 2019. So which we find as the main obstacles and barriers for preparation of BORs? Firstly, there is a lack of capacities and a number of employees in Serbian Environmental Protection Agency, Climate Change Division, but also sectoral ministries and institutions that are data holders or data sources. We hope when it comes to Environmental Protection Agency and Climate Change Division that some of these problems could be solved taking into account that, as I mentioned, since June we have a separate and the ministry in charge only for environmental protection. So we found in the process that a huge problem is, as a matter of fact, the lack of defined responsibility and especially capacities within the governmental institutions for development or preparation of the projections. There is a certain lack of capacities and understanding of need for monitoring of implementation of the mitigation actions. And in general, there is a lack of awareness, and of course, financial resources and technologies for mitigation infrastructural actions, but which we found as also the big problem is the lack of the knowledge and lack of the mechanism for monitoring and reporting on received financial support. As the result of that, we have a certain information when it comes to support received and needed. So in a previous time, the Serbia was the part of the regional projects financed by Austrian Environmental Protection, or led by Austrian Environmental Protection Agency, and also ECRAN project that was a regional one financed by the European Commission, whose support, with the support of this project, our capacities, but the capacities of other institutions were also significantly increased. The biggest support when it comes to establishment of the monitoring, the reporting and verification system came from the European Union through different projects. When it comes to capacity building needs, of course, based on this process of preparation of biannual updated report and everything else, more or less, we identified that there is a need for increase of knowledge of and the capacities of governmental institutions, but also when it comes to mitigation and implementation of the mitigation actions to local communities and industries. And we already start to work with these issues. So through different schemes and subsidies, through Energy Efficiency Fund, Environmental Protection Fund, but also feed-in tariffs. And for example, this increase in renewables and installed capacities in renewables more or less is the result, as a matter of fact, of feed-in tariff that was introduced in 2009. We also, for local communities, started with the GEF support project, which is completely dedicated for the local level. And the idea of the project is to identify a certain number of local communities and to try to identify the most important actions that will lead to GHG emissions at the local level. But in general, the main aim of the project is to try to establish a program that is going to incorporate those activities and to continue after the project finalization. Financial needs are presented for when it comes to infrastructure for energy and waste sector, and we also include forestry sector because we found that increase of sinks could be quite important for us. So specifically process, well, not just the result of the process, but the idea and the knowledge that we are going to have this process, as a matter of fact, raised and improved cooperation among the different stakeholders. So we had a working group that was involved from the early beginning in preparation of the document, and we had more intensive consultations during the preparation and the ICO process. So we also include during all this period civil society organization in the National Climate Change Committee. The list of events and the number of people that were present at the events, also the percentage of different stakeholders is presented in the slide. And it is obvious that during this period there were a lack of private companies that were involved in the process. So this is also the challenge that we are going to face in the next period. So how we see the process or the result of the preparation of the BUR. So, like I said, we have as the result for sure improved the cooperation with stakeholders. We moved in a sense of GHG inventory system from the perspective of QA and QC plan preparation, and we also prepared, or the agency prepared, the improvement plan for the inventory, and we understanding that reporting to the UNFCCC is asking some improvement. We came to this IPA project, which I already mentioned. In order to raise awareness in general and to make more publicly available information, we also established a specific site on which we published all activities, including different versions of documents that are prepared within the ministry. How we found and how we see the work of a team of technical experts, we really appreciate this work. Because based on this work, we found where are the most important gaps and which could be the possibilities for improvement in further reporting. We also prepare, based on that, plan for capacity building activities, and we also confirmed our previous views that for efficient reporting, we will need a clear and strict institutional and procedural arrangements, which, as a matter of fact, could be established only if there is a legal obligation on that. So, like I said, we prepared law on climate change. So I will not go through the questions because I think that I already everything included in the presentation. However, if there are any additional question or need for clarification, just feel free to ask.
Thank you, Serbia, and thank you for your understanding. And please let me reiterate that all these presentations will be submitted on the webpage, so anyone will be very easily approach them and just go all through them. Now, I would like to open the floor for questions from parties, if there are any. Okay, Turkey, I see, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Serbia, for this very detailed and nice presentation and for the efforts. Congratulations on the efforts that you have gone through the process. I would just like to ask two simple questions. One is, what do you consider to be the biggest challenge of establishing complete MRV system, which is set up currently under the framework of an IPA project in Serbia? And secondly, what challenge, if any, does Serbia observe in order to achieve the with additional measures scenario under NAMA with respect to each of the sectors, namely energy, industrial processes, agriculture and waste, of course in a very short manner? Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey. Now Austria, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Serbia, for this very interesting presentation. Now, towards the end of your presentation, you also showed how this ICA process improved the overall your activities in the area of climate change action. And you also mentioned throughout your presentation various cooperation activities in the general region with neighboring countries and other countries in the region. And would you please elaborate a little bit, tell us another example of what was a positive outcome of this exchange and of the exchange with countries in the region? If you could give us another example of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Austria. Now India, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. And at the outset, I must congratulate Serbia for very excellent presentation. Institutional arrangements for climate change governance in Serbia have been explained in Chapter 2.2 of BUR. We are interested in knowing more on the institutional arrangements. That's one. And then how do you collect data for your inventory, do you outsource it to private agencies or is it only collected by government agencies? And more importantly, how the quality assurance and quality control, as we call QA/QC, is done. Once again, I take this opportunity to commend excellent presentation made by you. Thank you.
Thank you, India. And now, Ms. Bozanic, you have the floor for the answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for a question. So, first question from Turkey. Well, the hugest challenge in the establishment of MRV system. From where to start? We told firstly that it's going to be inventory, but at the end we came to that that is the easiest part, as a matter of fact. Monitoring, well, we have impression that monitoring and reporting on policies and measures is among the hugest challenges because there is still lack of understanding of respective sectoral ministries that they should monitor and report on the actions. Slightly different is the ministry in charge for the energy because, like I said, due to the obligations under the Energy Community Treaty, they follow and they report. But yeah, this, cooperation with the ministries, sectoral ministries is quite good and nice until we come to the situation that somebody should report to us on something. So it seems that these policy and measures or mitigation implementation, monitoring and reporting on mitigation action implementation was the hugest challenge, and it seems that it's going to remain and that the establishment of the system will really be a process in this sense. So the second question, if I catch appropriately, was in regard to NAMAs in agriculture and waste sector, or I didn't understand something appropriately. Sorry, could you elaborate a bit?
Yes, for sure. My question was as follows. What challenge, if any, does Serbia observe in order to achieve with the additional measures scenario under NAMA with respect to each of the sectors, namely energy, industrial processes, agriculture and waste, if any? Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Well, I'm not sure that I could provide now some specific answer. In general, yeah, the challenge could be mostly in connection with certain changes, especially when it comes to energy sector and the strategic goals of the energy sector in meantime. So we used to have certain actions and goals in energy strategy, but in meantime the ministry in charge for the energy developed the new one. So those could be quite challenging. Well, of course, always financial resources or the lack of technologies, and to be honest, yeah, some capacities and understanding of certain ministries that they should or they could make additional effort could be quite, yeah, challenging in the further period. So I think that I hope I answered. To Austrian question, yeah, benefits from this regional project and regional cooperation. Firstly, it's quite useful for us the fact that EU countries that already passed certain actions and that are improved their capacities support our activities, taking into account that this is, as a matter of fact, transfer of experience and knowledge. So we found that it's easier and much faster to learn by doing or to learn from experience of those countries than to read a lot of documents and to try to clarify what, as a matter of fact, are the requirements of documents. Regional cooperation, why it's important? Well, it's important, and which were the benefits? Because in the region, the most of the countries had the same level of statistical data or actions, activities, more or less similar goals, etc. But all the countries are on a different level of achievement of those goals. So from that perspective, this regional cooperation for us is quite important because we could sit at a table and to exchange the views, experience with the countries with similar circumstances and activities. India institutional arrangements. Climate change unit within the ministry is in charge for coordination of the activities. So everything is on us at the end or from the beginning. Serbian Environmental Protection Agency is the only agency which collects data necessary for GHG inventory, but they do not collect, they just use certain data, for example, from Ministry of Mining and Energy, when it comes to energy sector or energy balance. They use energy balance, so Ministry of Mining and Energy provided those data to Serbian Environmental Protection Agency. Statistical Office provided data when it comes to agriculture. Serbian agency collect by themselves data for the waste management sector. And if there are any kind of gaps in industrial sector, they send questionnaires to facilities, and based on that, they calculate and prepare a GHG inventory. So the whole system for collection of data is on governmental institutions. Serbian Environmental Protection Agency prepared GHG inventory and these inventory reports and submits to our ministries, to our ministry. So in cooperation with other ministries, we prepare and like I said, with technical support of Faculty for Mechanical Engineering, we prepare other parts of the BUR. And according to the new law, this draft law on climate change, we are going to define all of these activities by law. So we are going to define obligation of the ministries to submit and to prepare certain reports on implementation of the mitigation actions. So more or less, we are trying to do everything by ourselves. But when it comes to projections or preparation of GHG scenarios, we even with the law put as a proposal that some external expert agency needs to be engaged in order to develop this, because to be honest, we do not have capacities for that. And we are quite confident that we cannot bring in the ministry engineers that could deal with this. QA and QC, agency developed a QA QC procedure like it is requested by European legislation. So they prepare these procedures and the plan for improvement. We had for that support of a project financed by European Commission. We started firstly with establishment of monitoring and reporting of data for emission trading system sectors, meaning energy and industry. Now with this law, we are going to cover all other sectors. And to be honest, I'm not an expert in this QA/QC. I know that they have a certain procedures that and plan for improvement that is based on calculation or preparation on of yearly inventory. And then if they see certain gaps or differences between sectoral and reference approach, they will go to a data holder institution in order to check what is going on and to try to push them to improve data for the next year. They will also use this software system for monitoring and reporting under the ETS as a certain software or data for certain checking of the data or the GG inventory. So I think that I covered climate change committee. What was the question? So yeah, climate change committee was established by governmental decision 3 years ago. We saw this committee as a possibility to try to share information with the respective ministries on our activities, on findings, on obligations, in order to try to attract them and to push and to press them to be involved in the activities. Because to be honest, you know, we're still in a status that a lot of people and a lot of ministries believe that when it comes to climate change, there is a climate change unit in Ministry of Environment, that it's not our part of job. But to be honest, this climate change committee shows certain results. So there is they started to react on our requests, which we found as quite important. During this period of few years, we found that we also, and from beginning, besides the governmental institutions, we had a representative of academia, universities, and local communities, and associations of economists from different chamber of commerce. And during the period of organization of the meeting and exchange of views, etc., we found that also involvement of representative of civil society organization could be beneficial for us. So since last year, we also have a representative of 2 different networks of NGOs as the members of the committee. Now we put in law on climate change also that climate change committee will have a certain supervising role in climate change related activities. I hope I didn't forget something.
Thank you, Serbia. Now the floor is yours, US.
I just wanted to commend Serbia for their overview and for the progress you've made in terms of applying the 2006 guidelines for the greenhouse gas inventory. And actually, our questions were clarified in some of the comments that you just made, so we don't have any questions. And thank you.
I thank you, Weston. So, dear colleagues and delegates, we have now heard from all parties for this SFV workshop. I would like to congratulate you on actively engaging in very fruitful discussions and contributing to this positive and constructive atmosphere in the room, which reflects the true spirit and principles of the ICA process. During this workshop, we heard about a wide array of experiences from 5 non-Annex I countries that span across different regions. We learned that even small countries can have great ambition that inspires others, and that the MRV system provides a foundation for solid data that could help inform policy decisions at the national level. We understood the unique challenges faced by countries presenting today, and that these challenges have been addressed both based on each country's capacities and capabilities. Also, we heard that by participating in the ICA process, countries have benefited from the feedback received and those actions taken before or during the preparation of the NDC are now revisited, them taking into account the experience in the ICA process. We also understood how the international community can further assist countries in continuing to improve their national MRV systems, among other needs, in order to be better prepared to address the challenges they encounter. It is our responsibility to make sure that these lessons are shared widely, and the SFV process helps in accelerating our collective transition towards a low emissions economy. The next round of SFV will be conducted at SBI 49 in May 2018. It is my sincere hope that the SFV continues to serve as an example for the international community by providing a platform where parties feel comfortable sharing their strengths and capacity building needs, while simultaneously building trust and confidence in the current MRV framework. The positive experience that we continue to gain from this process will lay a solid foundation for a new transparency arrangement under the Paris Agreement. Well, before adjourning this meeting, actually, I would like to now give floor to the Secretary to make a last announcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just an announcement. The MA of Belarus will be held at 3 p.m. this afternoon in the same room. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.